She was Australia's first global superstar. But when she died, half the country asked, "Who?" 50 million records sold. The first Australian voice to reach the top of the world charts, and yet, we forgot her long before she ever stopped singing. Her voice built a bridge between Melbourne and London, between folk and pop, between Australia and the world, and one day, she walked away. No scandal, no warning, just silence. Some said she was selfish. Some said she was broken. The truth was far more dangerous. She was tired of belonging to everyone except herself. In the years that followed, Australia changed. New faces filled the airwaves. Kylie, Olivia, and the glossy, easy laughter of a new era. And the woman who gave the country its first sound faded into static. She lived quietly. She sang softly. And then, one night, a car crash almost killed her. They said she'd never sing again. But Judith Durham wasn't finished. She came back, frail but fearless, to remind a nation what it once sounded like. And for a brief moment, every voice that had forgotten hers remembered. She gave Australia its first voice and reminded it what silence sounds like. To understand why we forgot her, we have to go back to the moment she walked away from fame, before fame ever had the chance to walk away from her. In the moment before we step back into her story, take a breath. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell us in the comments what this voice means to you. Because every memory you share keeps her song alive a little longer. Every legend begins with an accident. Judith's started on a ship she never meant to board. It began far from the spotlight. In a quiet suburb of Melbourne, a shy girl named Judith Mavis Cock was learning to sing. Not for fame, but for balance. Her mother said she had the kind of voice that could make a hymn feel like sunlight through glass. At 19, she joined a small group called The Seekers. They were just 4 friends, Judith, Athol, Bruce, and Keith, planning to play cruise ships for a season before getting real jobs. No one expected history. When their ship docked in London in 1964, everything changed. A manager heard them perform in a tiny club and said, "You sound like a smile the world hasn't heard yet." Within months, "I'll Never Find Another You" hit #1. Then came A World of Our Own, Georgie Girl, and The Impossible. 4 Australians topping the charts in Britain and America. Back home, the newspapers called them Australia's first global sound. For the first time, a nation built on borrowed culture found a voice that was its own, and at the center of it all, Judith Durham. Her tone was pure, almost fragile, yet every note carried weight. She didn't sing to impress. She sang like she meant to steady the world for a moment. The band toured endlessly. London, New York, every television show that mattered. She was 22 and suddenly, uncomfortably, famous. The crowds adored her, but Judith was uneasy with the worship. While the others basked in applause, she often stood just behind them, smiling, quiet, holding the sound together. Behind the scenes, that quiet became tension. The industry wanted glamour. Judith wanted grace. One producer asked her to smile more, move more, sound less church. She didn't argue. She just looked away and said, "I sing the way I am." They called her difficult. They said she didn't understand the business. But Judith understood something else, that the higher the voice, the shorter the breath. And in 1968, at the height of their fame, she made the decision that would shock a nation. She told her bandmates she was leaving. No scandal, no fight. Just a quiet goodbye from a woman the world thought was living her dream. The night Australia found out its sweetheart had walked away, and how the headlines turned a farewell into betrayal. At the peak of fame, she made the one move no one saw coming. She quit. It was 1968. The Seekers had sold millions of records, filled stadiums across continents, and become the sound of a confident young Australia. They were due to sign a new world tour contract that would make them millionaires. And then Judith Durham walked into the studio one morning, smiled politely, and said she was leaving. There was no argument, no shouting, just silence. The kind that follows after an earthquake, when people realize the ground has already shifted. The band was stunned. The press went wild. "The girl who quit success," one headline screamed. Another asked, "Why walk away from perfection?" But Judith had her answer long before anyone asked. In a note found years later, she wrote, "I was grateful, but I was also trapped in someone else's dream." The world saw it as betrayal. She saw it as survival. In the months that followed, the Seekers broke apart. Offers came in from London, New York, even Hollywood. All turned down. Judith retreated to Melbourne, rented a small flat, and tried to breathe again. She recorded quiet jazz tracks under her real name. She told a friend, "For the first time, I'm not performing. I'm just existing." But Australia didn't understand that kind of exit. They built her up as a national darling, then tore her down for walking away. Radio hosts mocked her for throwing it all away. Paparazzi waited outside her apartment, hoping she'd change her mind. When she didn't, they stopped coming. Silence again. She was 25 years old and already living like a ghost of herself. No farewell tour, no tearful reunion. Just the sound of her own voice fading from every frequency. A few years later, one of her bandmates said, "We thought she'd come back." Everyone does. But Judith was different. She meant it. In a world that worships success, walking away always looks like failure. But maybe for Judith Durham, it was something else. A quiet declaration that music should serve the soul, not the spotlight. The louder Australia sang, the quieter she became. After Judith left the Seekers, her name didn't fade overnight. It simply slipped out of the headlines, one song at a time. She released solo records, jazz, gospel, quiet pieces full of truth and restraint. But the world had moved on to something flashier. It was the age of television glamour, disco lights, and women who sold rebellion, not reflection. Kylie Minogue was on every magazine cover. Olivia Newton-John ruled the radio, and somewhere in Melbourne, Judith Durham, the woman who opened those doors, sat in a small flat, writing songs no station would play. She once said, "I was never built for noise." It wasn't bitterness, just fact. She'd seen how fame twisted people. She'd walked away once. Now, she simply refused to chase. But the industry wasn't kind to the ones who didn't play along. Her voice, once called the sound of a nation, vanished from the charts. Her concerts drew older crowds, the kind who remembered, the kind who still sang along softly to Georgie Girl. For younger Australians, she became a name they'd maybe heard their parents mention, a ghost from a simpler time. And yet, Judith never complained. When asked if she missed the fame, she smiled and said, "Not really. I was never famous. The songs were still, there's a cost to being forgotten by the world you once carried." When Australia celebrated its bicentennial in 1988, a showcase of music meant to represent the nation, her name was nowhere on the list. A journalist later wrote, "The woman who gave Australia its first voice was left out of its story." Perhaps that's what hurt most. Not being replaced, but being erased. Even so, she kept singing. Small charity gigs, local halls, her voice gentler now, but unwavering. Her audiences weren't millions anymore, but they were faithful. Every night, at least one person in the crowd cried. Not for the fame she'd lost, but for the honesty she refused to let go. Judith never sought revenge on an industry that had outgrown her. She just sang slower, lower, with more air than before, as if she knew every note might be the last breath of a dream she once left behind. In the next chapter, the silence is broken, violently. A crash on a quiet highway nearly ends everything, and the woman the world had forgotten finds herself facing the one thing she never feared: the end of her own voice. It took a crash to wake a voice the world had already buried. In 1990, Judith Durham and her husband, Ron Edgeworth, were driving home after a concert when a car veered into their lane. Metal met metal. For a moment, everything that had once been music turned to noise. Judith survived, barely. Ron was badly hurt. Doctors told her she might never sing again. Her lungs, the instruments she'd protected all her life, were torn and bruised. The woman who once stood for perfect pitch was left gasping for breath. For weeks, she said nothing to the press. Friends visited, reporters camped outside the hospital, but Judith stayed silent. She later admitted, "I wasn't thinking about singing. I was thinking about whether I still belonged here." It was a small thing that changed her mind. A nurse humming, "The carnival is over," while changing her bandages. Judith smiled, and for the first time since the crash, she whispered the words along. The nurse cried. So did Judith. That moment lit something again. Not the hunger for fame, that had died long ago, but the will to live through the song itself. 3 years later, she returned to the stage. The Seekers announced a 25th anniversary reunion tour, a decision that stunned even their old fans. When Judith walked out that first night, thinner, older, with silver in her hair, the crowd erupted. She stood still for a second, tears in her eyes, and said, "It's been a while, hasn't it?" Then she sang. The notes weren't as bright, but they carried something deeper, the sound of a survivor. When she finished, the audience didn't cheer immediately. They just stood, as if afraid to break the moment. Critics called it a resurrection. Others called it a goodbye in slow motion. Judith called it enough. The tour sold out. Across cities and continents, people who hadn't spoken her name in decades were suddenly singing her words again. And for a brief, golden window, Australia remembered the woman it once forgot. But fame, even gentle fame, doesn't last. When the reunion ended, Judith went home to her quiet life again. But something had changed. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace. She'd proven to herself, and to the country that once turned away, that she didn't need to be on top of the world to be heard. All she needed was air in her lungs and one more song. In the next chapter, the final curtain. A fading voice, an empty stage, and a question that still lingers long after the applause. Does a nation truly remember the ones it forgets too soon? By the time Australia remembered her, she was already running out of breath. After the reunion tours ended, Judith slipped back into the quiet she'd always loved. No tabloids, no crowds, just the steady rhythm of the sea outside her Melbourne home, and the slow work of writing songs that almost no one would ever hear. Her husband, Ron, grew weaker from motor neurone disease. Judith cared for him until his final days, calling him my partner in melody. When he died in 1994, she didn't appear in public for months. Friends said she still sang every night, not to audiences, but to him. In those years, she began writing what she called the Australian Cities Suite, a musical love letter to the country that had both made and forgotten her. Every track was about home. Sydney's skyline, Adelaide's calm, Melbourne's rain. She poured herself into it, hoping to leave behind something that would outlive her lungs. As her health declined, she turned down interviews. When asked if she would tour again, she laughed softly. "I've had my encores. I think the music will do fine without me." But fate wasn't done giving her goodbyes. In 2013, she was invited to perform at a televised concert marking the Seekers' 50th anniversary. Doctors warned her not to. She went anyway. The footage is hard to watch. Judith in a white suit, hands trembling slightly, her voice thinner than ever, but still unmistakably hers. She sang, "I'll never find another you." And for a moment, time folded back. You could almost hear the world pause, listening again to the sound it had once lost. When the song ended, she whispered, "Thank you," into the microphone. No speech, no promises, just that. The simplest goodbye she ever gave. 9 years later, in 2022, Judith Durham passed away at the age of 79. Her death was marked by a state funeral, broadcast across the country. For many Australians, it was the first time they'd heard her name, and the first time they realized what they'd forgotten. Every country chooses who to remember and who to forget. When Judith Durham died, the Prime Minister called her the sound of a generation. Television anchors used words like angelic, pure, and irreplaceable. The same media that once ignored her now played her songs on loop. It was beautiful. It was also too late. At her funeral, politicians sat in the front row, heads bowed. The same halls that once refused to book her now echoed with "The carnival is over." The irony wasn't lost on anyone old enough. And with every replay, a new listener discovers the calm courage in her voice, a reminder that art doesn't need noise to last. Critics today call her Australia's first international export. But the truth runs deeper. She was the first to show that a working-class country could sing with grace, not just grit. That beauty didn't have to shout to be heard. Some say she sold too little of herself. Others say she kept just enough to stay whole. Either way, Judith Durham didn't vanish. She simply waited for the world to slow down enough to hear her again. Her story isn't about tragedy or even fame. It's about endurance, the kind that doesn't demand applause, the kind that exists quietly, like breath, until someone finally listens. So when Australia calls her the nation's voice, maybe that's true. Because every nation needs someone willing to fall silent, to remind it what listening really means. And maybe that's what she gave us in the end. Not a farewell, but a pause long enough to remember. She gave Australia its first sound. And even now, beneath all the noise, it's still there, waiting. If her voice reached you tonight, even for a moment, don't let it fade again. Hit subscribe, leave a like, share this story, and tell us what Judith Durham's music means to you. Because every memory you share keeps her song alive a little longer. This is Farewell Aussie Stars, where legends never truly vanish. They just wait to be heard.